The Galactic Council had mapped every corner of the known universe. 17,000 spacefaring civilizations traded, communicated, and sometimes fought across the spiral arms of the Milky Way. Ships traveled between stars like cars on a highway. Alien species that looked nothing like each other had learned to live together in peace. It was a golden age for the galaxy. But on every star chart, one small yellow sun remained circled in red. Its third planet was marked with a single word in every known language: forbidden. That planet was Earth. Commander Laura had spent 3 years trying to understand why. She had sent messages to every species she could contact. She had filed requests with every department of the Galactic Council. She had begged, argued, and demanded answers. And finally, after 3 years of waiting, she stood in the Great Council chamber on Station Prime, the largest diplomatic hub in the galaxy. The chamber was enormous. It could hold representatives from 100 different worlds at once. Strange beings filled the seats around her. Some had tentacles. Some had wings. Some were made of light or crystal or things Laura could not name. They all watched her with expressions she could not read. Laura took a deep breath and spoke. "You must understand our confusion. Humanity has achieved faster-than-light travel. We have cured our worst diseases. We have unified our planet under one government. By every standard your council uses, we should qualify for membership. But every time we apply, we are rejected without explanation." A murmur passed through the chamber. Laura saw some delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Others made strange gestures with their limbs or appendages. Then the eldest among them rose from his throne. His name was, and he belonged to the Ani. The Ani were the oldest known species in the galaxy. They had walked among the stars when Earth's sun was still forming from clouds of gas and dust. Himself was over 200,000 years old. His form was difficult to look at. He seemed to shift between solid and liquid and gas, like a living aurora made of colors that had no human names. When he moved, reality itself seemed to bend around him. "Commander," said. His voice came through Laura's neural translator as something between a whisper and a song. "The Ani have observed your world for 200,000 of your years. We watched your ancestors paint animals on cave walls. We saw your first fires burning in the darkness. We witnessed your first wars and your first acts of kindness." Laura stood. "Then you know we have grown. We are not the same species that fought with sticks and stones." "We know this," agreed. His form flickered with strange colors. "We have watched you evolve, learn, and reach for the stars. Your progress has been remarkable." "Then why do you reject us?" Laura asked. "Why does the entire galaxy treat Earth like a plague zone?" The chamber went silent. Laura noticed that several delegates had stopped moving entirely. Others seemed to shrink back in their seats, as if she had said something terrible. Descended from his throne. His form became more solid as he approached her, condensing into something that almost looked like a tall, thin humanoid made of shifting light. He stopped within arm's reach of her, something that had never happened in the recorded history of Galactic Council proceedings. "We do not avoid your world because of what you are," he said quietly. His words meant only for her. "We avoid it because of what else lives there." Laura felt cold. The climate in the chamber was carefully controlled, but she felt a chill run down her spine anyway. "What do you mean?" she asked. "What else lives there? Earth has millions of species, animals, plants, insects. Which one are you talking about?" Ancient eyes, if they could be called eyes, met hers. And in those eyes, Laura saw something she never expected to see in a being so old and powerful. "Fear. Your species is not alone on Earth," said. "It never has been. And the things that share your world are far, far older than us." Laura's mind raced. She thought of every strange story she had ever heard. Ancient myths about gods and monsters, unexplained disappearances, mysterious structures found in impossible places, things that scientists had dismissed as errors or hoaxes. "What things?" she demanded. "Tell me what you know." Was silent for a long moment. Around them the council chamber remained frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. "We do not speak their names," finally said. "We do not acknowledge their existence in our records. We do not study them or try to communicate with them. We simply stay away." "That's not an answer," Laura said. "It is the only answer I can give." His form flickered again, and Laura thought she saw something like sadness in his shifting colors. "Commander, the Ani have existed for longer than most stars. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have witnessed the birth and death of entire species. In all that time, we have learned one thing above all others." "What?" "Some things are best left undisturbed." Turned away from her, beginning to drift back toward his throne. "The beings that share your world existed before the first stars ignited. They will exist long after the last stars burn out. They do not think as we think. They do not want what we want. They simply are, in a way that defies all understanding." Laura stepped forward. "Wait, if these beings are so dangerous, why haven't they destroyed humanity? We've lived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years." Paused. His form turned back toward her, and this time Laura thought she saw something new in his expression. Not just fear, but also wonder, and perhaps a tiny bit of respect. "That," he said slowly, "is the question that terrifies us most of all. Every other species that has encountered these beings has been destroyed or driven mad. Yet humanity lives beside them, generation after generation, completely unaware of their presence." He returned to his throne and settled into it like a cloud settling onto a mountain. "The Galactic Council will not grant Earth membership," announced, his voice now carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Not because we hate humanity or fear what you might do, but because we fear what might follow you out into the stars." Laura wanted to argue. She wanted to demand more answers, more explanations, more proof. But she could see in the faces of every delegate that the decision was final. The vote would not even be held. Earth would remain isolated, forbidden, alone. As she turned to leave the chamber, spoke one last time. "Commander," he called, "if you are wise, you will return to your world and live out your days in peace. Do not dig too deep. Do not ask too many questions. Some truths are better left unknown." Laura stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "I appreciate your advice," she said, "but you clearly don't know humans very well. Telling us not to look for something is the way to make us search for it." She walked out of the chamber, her mind already racing with plans. The galaxy thought Earth was dangerous. They thought something ancient and terrible lurked beneath the surface of her world. Laura intended to find out if they were right. 6 months had passed since Laura stood before the Galactic Council. 6 months of research, investigation, and growing unease. She had returned to Earth with more questions than answers, and she had spent every day since then searching for the truth. Now she sat in a briefing room on Orbital Station Unity, Earth's primary space hub. Through the windows, she could see the blue and green curve of her home planet, peaceful and beautiful against the black void of space. But Laura knew that beauty might hide something terrible. Across the table sat Dr. Price, a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He was the head of Earth's newly formed research division, created specifically to investigate the Council's warnings. Next to him sat Admiral Cole, commander of Earth's small but growing space fleet. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face showed the skepticism of a lifelong military officer. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Cole said, leaning forward in her chair. "The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, beings who have mastered physics we can barely imagine, are afraid of something on our planet." "Not just afraid," Laura corrected. "Terrified. I spent the last 6 months trying to get more information from other species. Every single one either refused to talk about it or literally ran away when I mentioned Earth." That seems extreme, Cole said. It is extreme, that's what worries me. Dr. Price cleared his throat and activated a holographic display. Earth appeared above the table, rotating slowly, its familiar oceans and continents glowing with soft light. I've been going through our historical and anthropological databases since Commander's initial report, he said. I was looking for anything unusual, unexplained events, strange discoveries, things that didn't fit the official narrative. And Admiral Cole asked. Price touched a control, and points of red light began appearing across the holographic Earth. Dozens of them, scattered across every continent and ocean. Every culture on Earth, without exception, has stories about beings that existed before humanity, Price said. Gods, spirits, monsters, things that lived in the darkness. Most historians dismiss these as primitive superstitions. But what if they weren't superstitions? What if they were memories? Cole frowned. You're suggesting that ancient myths are literally true. I'm suggesting that myths often contain a kernel of truth. Price zoomed in on one of the red points, showing Antarctica. In 1923, a geological survey team found something buried under the ice. A structure. The report described it as a city, but made of materials no one could identify. The entire team was reassigned within a week, and the report was classified at the highest level. Another red point lit up in the Pacific Ocean. In 1967, a deep-sea research vessel recorded sounds from the trench, sounds that appeared to be language but contained frequencies that shouldn't be possible in water. The recording was confiscated by military intelligence. More points lit up: South America, Central Africa, the mountains of Tibet. I could go on, Price said quietly. For centuries, we've been finding evidence of something, and for centuries, our governments have been making that evidence disappear. Laura stared at the glowing points on the map. Why would they hide this? Fear, probably, Price said. Imagine you're a government official in 1923. You've just received a report about an impossible city under the Antarctic ice. What do? Tell the public. Admit that everything we think we know about Earth's history might be wrong. It's easier to classify it and pretend it doesn't exist. Admiral Cole stood up abruptly. This is all very interesting, but it's also circumstantial. Old reports and classified files don't prove anything. Before anyone could respond, the station's alert system activated. But it wasn't the standard yellow of a drill or the red of an emergency. It was a color none of them had seen before, a deep, pulsing purple. What is that? Cole demanded. The intercom crackled to life. Admiral Commander Dr. Price, you need to come to the command center immediately. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Samuel Gray, the station's communications officer. He sounded scared. We're receiving a transmission, and it's coming from inside the planet. They rushed through the corridors to the command center. Lieutenant Gray sat at his station, his young face pale and sweating. On the main display, a waveform pulsed and writhed like something alive. It started 3 minutes ago, Gray said without looking up. The signal is originating from somewhere beneath the Pacific Ocean, approximately 11 kilometers down. The trench, Price whispered. That's impossible, Cole said. Nothing down there could generate a signal strong enough to reach orbit. I know, Gray replied, and that's not the strangest part. Watch the waveform. Laura watched. The signal wasn't random. It had a pattern, a rhythm. It almost looked like a heartbeat. I've been trying to analyze it, Gray continued. It's not using any known communication protocol. Not binary, not analog, not quantum. It's something else entirely. Something I've never seen before. Can you translate it? Price asked. Gray's hands trembled slightly as he touched his controls. That's the thing, sir. I didn't have to translate it. The signal contained something like a codec, a key to understanding it. Almost as if whatever sent this wanted to make absolutely sure we could understand it. He pressed a button. A voice filled the command center. but it wasn't really a voice. It was something that seemed to speak directly into their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. It was ancient and vast and utterly alien, yet somehow also strangely familiar. "We have waited," the voice said. "We have watched. The children of Earth reach for the stars, and the old ones of the galaxy quake in fear. It is time. Come to us. Come to the deep. Learn the truth of your inheritance." The transmission ended. The command center was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Laura was the first to speak. "Can you trace the exact location?" Gray nodded slowly. "Already done, Commander. The signal came from a point in the trench, about 15 kilometers northeast of Challenger Deep." "That's the deepest point in Earth's oceans," Cole said. "No human has ever been there. The pressure would crush any normal vessel." "Then we build something that isn't normal," Laura said. She turned to face the Admiral. "We have access to Galactic Council technology now, materials that can withstand pressures we couldn't even imagine a decade ago." Cole shook her head. "You want to go down there, after what we just heard?" "Something under our own planet is asking us to visit," Laura replied. "Something that might explain why the entire galaxy is afraid of Earth. Yes, Admiral, I want to go down there. I need to go down there." Price stepped forward. "She's right. If there really is something living beneath our oceans, something ancient and intelligent, we need to know about it. We can't make informed decisions about Earth's future without understanding our past." Admiral Cole looked at each of them in turn. Her face was hard, but Laura could see the curiosity burning behind her eyes. Cole hadn't risen to Admiral by being timid. "Fine," Cole said finally. "I'll authorize the construction of a deep-sea vessel, but I'm coming with you. Whatever is down there, humanity faces it together." Laura nodded. "Then let's start building." Through the windows of the command center, Earth continued its slow rotation, beautiful and mysterious. And somewhere in its darkest depths, something ancient stirred, waiting for the children of the surface to finally come home. The submersible Leviathan sank into the darkness of the trench. Its hull was made of materials borrowed from Galactic Council technology, metals and composites that could withstand pressures that would crush anything humans had built before. 3 months had passed since the mysterious transmission, 3 months of construction, planning, and growing fear. Laura sat in the co-pilot seat, watching the ocean swallow them whole. Outside the reinforced windows, the water grew darker with every passing meter. First blue, then deep blue, then black as midnight. Beside her, pilot Christopher Moore kept his hands steady on the controls. He was a tall man with a calm face, but Laura could see the tension in his jaw. Behind them, Dr. Price monitored the scientific instruments, while Lieutenant Samuel Gray handled the communications equipment. "Passing 8,000 meters, Moore announced. His voice was flat and professional, all systems functioning normally. At 8,000 meters, the pressure outside was over 800 times the pressure at the surface. A single crack in the hull would kill them all instantly. But the Leviathan held steady, descending deeper into the abyss. "I'm picking up something on the sonar," Gray said. "Structures, artificial structures, they're directly below us." Price leaned over to look at Gray's screen. His eyes went wide. "Those readings can't be right. The scale is impossible." "What do you see?" Laura asked. "According to these instruments, there's a structure down there that's over 20 kilometers across." Price shook his head slowly. "That's bigger than most cities on the surface." Moore adjusted their course, following the coordinates embedded in the original transmission. The darkness outside the windows remained absolute. No light from the surface could reach these depths. The only illumination came from the Leviathan's own external lights, cutting through the water like searchlights through fog. 12,000 meters, Moore said. "We've passed the point where any previous human vessel could survive." "How deep does the signal say we need to go?" Laura asked. Gray checked his instruments. "Another 3,000 meters, roughly." They continued to descend. The silence inside the submersible was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep of instruments. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, imagining what might wait for them below. Then the lights caught something. There, Price breathed. Do you see it? Laura saw it. Rising out of the darkness were walls of black stone, carved with spiraling patterns that seemed to shift and move in the light. Towers stretched upward beyond the reach of their instruments, disappearing into the blackness above. It was a city, or perhaps a temple, built on a scale that made human construction look like children's toys. "How old is this?" Laura whispered. Price was staring at his instruments with an expression of shock. "Based on the geological formations around it, I'd estimate this structure is at least 300 million years old, possibly older." "That's before dinosaurs," Moore said. "That's before almost everything." "Whatever built this was here when Earth was barely recognizable," Price agreed. "When our ancestors were still fish swimming in ancient seas." The Leviathan continued its descent, passing between massive columns carved with symbols that hurt the eyes to look at directly. Laura tried to focus on one of the symbols, but her vision seemed to slide away from it, like trying to grab hold of water. Suddenly, the submersible shuddered. Something had taken hold of them, but gently, like a parent lifting a child. "I've lost control of the steering," Moore said, surprisingly calm. "Something is guiding us." They were pulled deeper into the city, through passages that should have been too narrow for their vessel but somehow weren't. And then they passed through something that shouldn't have existed at these depths, a membrane of energy, shimmering with colors that had no names. On the other side, everything changed. They were no longer in water. The Leviathan settled onto a platform of black stone, surrounded by air that smelled strange but breathable. Soft blue light came from patterns on the walls, bioluminescent and beautiful. "Pressure normalized," Gray said, his voice shaking. "Atmosphere is breathable. This is impossible." The hatch of the Leviathan opened on its own. Laura hesitated for only a moment, then stood and walked toward it. "Commander," Moore called, "we don't know what's out there." "That's why we came," Laura replied, "to find out." She stepped out onto the black stone platform. The chamber around her was vast beyond comprehension, stretching so far that the walls were lost in darkness. And there, waiting in the center of the chamber, was something that made her mind struggle to understand what she was seeing. It had no fixed form. It was geometry and light and something else, something that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could perceive. It was like looking at a living mathematical equation, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But somehow, impossibly, it wasn't frightening. Looking at it, Laura felt a strange sense of familiarity, like meeting a relative she had never known existed. The others emerged from the Leviathan behind her, each of them stopping in awe as they saw the being before them. "You came," the being said. Its voice was the same as the transmission, speaking directly into their minds. "We knew you would. Curiosity is in your blood. It always has been." Laura found her voice. "What are you?" "We are the architects," the being replied. "We walked between the stars when your sun was still a cloud of dust. We built civilizations that spanned galaxies, and when we grew tired of existence, when eternity became too heavy to bear, we slept in the deep places of young worlds." "You've been here all along," Price said, "beneath our oceans, for hundreds of millions of years." "Yes." Laura stepped forward. "Did you create us?" The architect's form shifted, and for a moment Laura thought she saw something like amusement in its impossible geometry. "Create? No, we planted seeds. Long ago, when this world was young, we left fragments of ourselves in the primordial waters, not to build servants or successors, but simply to see what might grow. Evolution did the rest. Your species is one of many experiments scattered across the cosmos, but you are the first to reach this stage, the first to come knocking at our door." "The Galactic Council," Laura said. "They fear you. They fear us because of our connection to you." "They remember," the architect agreed. "Deep in their genetic memory, every intelligent species in this galaxy carries the echo of an ancient war, a conflict between architects that broke the universe itself. They fear us because their ancestors survived our wrath, and they fear you because you carry our legacy in every cell of your bodies." "Why are you telling us this?" Moore asked. "What do you want from us?" The architect's form pulsed with gentle light. "Want? We are beyond want, beyond need. We are simply observers now, but we offer you a choice. The galaxy fears what you carry within you. The spark of the architects, diluted through millions of years but still present. You can hide this truth, remain small and safe, and perhaps be tolerated by the elder species." The being paused, and its form seemed to grow larger, more magnificent. "Or you can embrace what you are, claim your inheritance. Show the galaxy that the children of Earth are not to be feared but to be followed. The choice is yours. It always has been." Laura looked at her companions. She saw fear in their eyes but also wonder. And behind the wonder, she saw the same determination that had driven humanity to explore every corner of their world, to reach for the stars, to never stop asking questions. She turned back to the architect. "We've spent our entire history fighting against our own limitations," she said. "Telling us we're connected to the oldest beings in the universe isn't going to make us small. It's going to make us reach higher." The architect's form flickered, and Laura was certain now that what she saw was approval. "Then go," it said. "Return to the stars, tell them what you have learned. And remember, the future is not written. Not by us, not by the Council, not by the universe itself. It is written by those brave enough to hold the pen." The membrane shimmered again, and Laura knew their time in the deep was ending. But as she walked back toward the Leviathan, she felt different. The weight of millions of years of history pressed against her shoulders, but instead of crushing her, it lifted her up. Humanity had just discovered they were not alone on their own planet, and somehow that made them stronger than ever. 1 year after the descent into the trench, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. News of humanity's discovery had spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with the ability to travel between stars wanted to hear what Earth's representatives had to say. The council chamber on Station Prime was packed beyond capacity. Delegates from 3,000 worlds filled every seat, and millions more watched through quantum-linked broadcasts that reached every corner of the galaxy. The air hummed with tension and fear and curiosity. Laura stood at the central podium, no longer wearing the uniform of a commander. She had been appointed ambassador of Earth, the first human to hold such a title. Behind her, massive screens displayed images from the underwater city, the carved walls, the impossible architecture, and the architect itself, captured in recordings that scientists across the galaxy were still trying to understand. The chamber fell silent as Laura prepared to speak. She could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon her, many belonging to species that had avoided Earth for millions of years. They had come to hear the truth, and she intended to give it to them. "1 year ago," she began, "I stood in this chamber and asked why Earth was forbidden. I demanded to know why humanity was rejected from the galactic community. Elder of the Ani told me that something else lived on our world, something ancient and terrible. He told me that the entire galaxy feared whatever shared our planet." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. He was right. Something does live beneath Earth's oceans. Beings older than any species in this chamber, older than the stars themselves. They call themselves the architects, and they have been watching over Earth since before life crawled out of the primordial seas. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Laura saw delegates shifting nervously, making religious gestures, whispering to their neighbors. "But Elder was also wrong," Laura continued. "He told me these beings were dangerous, that they should be avoided at all costs. He told me that humanity's connection to them made us a threat to the galaxy. She gestured, and new images appeared on the screens. Not images of war or destruction, but recordings from the architect's own memory. Cities that had housed billions in perfect harmony, technologies that had ended suffering, art and music that existed in dimensions beyond normal comprehension. The architects were not monsters, Laura said. They were builders, creators, explorers. They crossed the universe when the universe was young, planting seeds of life on countless worlds, not to create servants or weapons but simply to see what might grow. Rose from his crystalline throne, his ancient form rippling with agitation. You speak as if you know these beings, Ambassador. The Ani remember them differently. We remember a war that shattered stars and broke the very fabric of reality. We remember species wiped from existence because they drew the attention of the architects. You cannot dismiss of memory with pretty pictures. I don't dismiss it, Laura replied calmly. The architects told us about the war. They told us how their kind split into factions over a single question, whether to guide younger species or to let them find their own way. The disagreement grew into conflict, and the conflict destroyed civilizations. She met ancient gaze directly. But that war ended millions of years before your species existed, Elder. The architects have spent eons in slumber, not because they were defeated, but because they chose to stop. They chose to let the universe heal. They chose to let new life grow without their interference. And now they wake, said, his voice carrying a note of fear. Now they speak with humanity, share their secrets, prepare for who knows what. This is exactly what we feared. They wake because we knocked on their door, Laura said. They didn't summon us or try to control us. They simply answered when we called. And do you know what they told us? The chamber was silent. Every delegate leaned forward, waiting. They told us the choice was ours. They offered us knowledge of our heritage, but they didn't demand anything in return. They said the future is not written by ancient powers or galactic councils. It is written by those brave enough to hold the pen. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Laura recognized Representative Cora from the collective, a species known throughout the galaxy for their strict logic and objectivity. Ambassador, Cora said, you present the architects as benevolent figures, but even accepting your account, you cannot deny that humanity now carries a dangerous legacy. The genetic connection to these beings makes your species unpredictable. How can we trust that you will not repeat the architect's mistakes? Laura nodded. It was a fair question. You want proof that humanity can be trusted, she said. Very well, let me tell you about human history. She touched a control and the screens behind her changed. They showed images from Earth's past, wars and destruction, yes, but also moments of incredible courage and compassion. We have committed terrible acts, Laura admitted. We have waged wars over land and resources and ideas. We have hurt each other in ways that shame us to remember. If you judge us by our worst moments, you would be right to fear us. She changed the images again. Now the screens showed humans building hospitals, feeding the hungry, risking their lives to save strangers. But we have also shown incredible capacity for good. We have crossed oceans to help people we never met. We have sacrificed our own lives to protect the weak. We have faced our darkest impulses and chosen, again and again, to be better. Laura looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. The architects gave us the spark of life, but they did not give us our choices. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every decision to reach for something greater, those came from us. The architects planted a seed, but humanity decided what kind of tree would grow. She stepped out from behind the podium, standing in the center of the chamber. The galaxy can spend the next million years afraid of what humanity might become. You can keep Earth isolated, watch us from a distance, and hope we never cause problems. That is your choice. She spread her arms wide. Or you can work with us. You can share your knowledge and let us share ours. You can help us become the best version of ourselves, and maybe, in the process, we can help you become the best version of yourselves too. The architects believed that the future belongs to those who are brave enough to shape it. Let's be brave together. The chamber erupted into noise. Delegates argued with each other, with their translators, with representatives from other worlds. Some shouted in anger, others in support. The noise was overwhelming. Then slowly one delegate stood, then another, then a dozen more. Species that had fled at the mention of Earth's name were now rising to their feet, not in protest but in acknowledgement. The vote that followed was not unanimous. It never would be. Old fears ran too deep for a single speech to erase them. But when the final count was announced, Earth had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. For the first time in history, humanity would have a seat at the table where the galaxy's future was decided. As Laura left the chamber, approached her. His ancient form was calmer now, his colors more muted. "You have changed things, Ambassador," he said. "Whether for better or worse, only time will tell." "That's all any of us can do," Laura replied. "Change things and hope we got it right." "The Ani have a saying," continued. "Those who carry fire must be prepared to be burned. I hope, for all our sakes, that humanity's flames bring light rather than destruction." Laura looked back at the chamber, where delegates were still discussing what they had witnessed, still processing the revelation that would reshape galactic politics for generations. "So do we, Elder," she said quietly. "So do we." She walked out into the corridor, ready to report to Earth that humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, they would not walk it alone. 10 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Council. In that decade, humanity had changed more than in all the centuries before. Ships bearing the blue and green flag of Earth now traveled to 100 different worlds. Human colonies had been established on planets that previous generations could only dream about. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy had begun to accept that the children of the architects might not be something to fear after all. Laura stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Unity, watching the endless dance of ships passing through Earth's orbital space. Vessels from dozens of species came and went, trading goods and ideas with a planet that had once been forbidden to approach. The view never failed to amaze her. She was no longer ambassador. 10 years of politics and diplomacy had taken their toll, and she had stepped down to make room for younger voices. Now, she held the title of Secretary General of the United Earth Council, a position that let her guide humanity's path without the constant travel and negotiation. Beside her stood a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Maya was 20 years old, Laura's daughter, born in the same year that Earth joined the Council. She had grown up in a world where aliens were neighbors rather than strangers, where the stars were not distant lights but possible destinations. "Were you ever afraid?" Maya asked, looking out at the traffic of ships. "When you first went down there, when you met the architects?" Laura considered the question. She had been asked it many times over the years by journalists and historians and curious children, but coming from her daughter, it felt different. "Terrified," she admitted. "Not of the architects themselves, but of what their existence meant. Everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about our place in the universe, suddenly seemed incomplete. I wasn't sure humanity was ready for that kind of truth." "And now?" Laura smiled. "Now I understand that incomplete knowledge isn't the same as wrong knowledge. We are still human. We still make choices based on our own values, our own experiences. The architects gave us a gift millions of years ago, but what we do with it is entirely up to us." Maya nodded slowly. She was preparing for her first diplomatic posting, an assignment to the Ani. It was a position that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. A human, living among the oldest species in the galaxy, working to build bridges between ancient fear and new hope. A soft chime interrupted their conversation. Laura accepted the incoming communication, and a holographic display appeared before them. The face that emerged belonged to Christopher Moore, the pilot who had guided the Leviathan into the depths a decade ago. He was older now, his hair showing traces of gray, but his eyes still held the same calm steadiness that Laura remembered. He had risen through the ranks over the years, eventually becoming captain of the deep space vessel Pioneer, one of Earth's most advanced exploration ships. Secretary General, he said, a hint of barely contained excitement in his voice. We've reached the coordinates. You need to see this. The display expanded, showing what the Pioneer's instruments had detected. Laura felt her breath catch in her throat. Floating in the void between galaxies, impossibly far from any star, was a structure larger than anything humanity or any known species had ever built. It was a station, or perhaps a gateway made of the same dark material as the underwater city. Lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. The architects told us about this place during our last communication, Moore explained. They called it the threshold. They said that when humanity was ready, we would find it. What does it do? Maya asked, stepping closer to the display. According to the architects, it's a doorway. It leads to places even they have never explored. Other galaxies, other dimensions, possibilities that no species in this universe has ever encountered. Laura stared at the structure, feeling the same mix of fear and wonder that she had felt in the depths of the trench. The architects had planted seeds across the cosmos, but they had never claimed to know everything. The universe was vast beyond imagination, and even beings as old as time itself had only scratched its surface. They left another message, Moore continued. They said the threshold has been waiting for someone brave enough to walk through, someone willing to venture into the unknown without guarantee of return. They said it was time for the children to surpass the parents. The communication ended, but the image of the threshold remained, turning slowly in the void. Maya turned to her mother. Are we going to send an expedition? Laura was quiet for a long moment. She thought about everything humanity had accomplished since she first stood before the Galactic Council demanding answers. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged stronger. They had convinced a galaxy to give them a chance. They had proven that carrying the legacy of ancient powers did not make them dangerous, but brave. Yes, she finally said. We're going to send word to every species that will listen. Tell them Earth is organizing an expedition to the threshold. Tell them any civilization that wants to join us is welcome. Do you think they'll come? Laura smiled. Some will. Others will stay behind, too afraid of what we might find. But that's always been the way, hasn't it? Some people rush forward into the unknown while others hold back. The universe doesn't wait for everyone to be ready. She turned back to the observation window. Earth hung below them, the same blue and green world that had given birth to humanity so long ago. Somewhere in its deepest oceans, the architects continued their ancient vigil, dreaming of the children who had exceeded all expectations. You know, Laura said quietly, the Galactic Council avoided Earth for millions of years because they thought we were dangerous. They thought whatever lived on our planet would bring destruction to the stars. Were they right? Laura shook her head. They were right that we would bring change, but they were wrong about what kind of change. We haven't destroyed anything. We've built bridges. We've asked questions. We've refused to let fear control our choices. She put a hand on Maya's shoulder. That's what it means to be human, she continued. We don't turn back just because the path is dark. We don't give up just because the odds are against us. We keep moving forward, keep reaching higher, keep asking what's beyond the next horizon. Maya looked at the threshold on the display, then at her mother, then at the earth below. The architects created us to see what might grow, she said. I think they would be proud of what we've become. I think so too. The ships continued their dance through Earth's orbital space, carrying passengers and cargo from 100 different worlds. Somewhere in the deep void between galaxies, the threshold waited for those brave enough to seek it. And on a small blue planet that had once been forbidden, humanity prepared to take its next great step into the unknown. The galaxy's oldest species had been right to avoid Earth, not because of the danger humanity posed, but because of the change they would inevitably bring. Change was frightening. Change was unpredictable. Change meant that nothing would ever be the same. But change was also hope. Change was growth. Change was the very essence of life itself. And in the end, Laura thought as she watched the stars, change was the greatest gift any species could give to the universe. The story of humanity was far from over. In many ways, it was only beginning.